After a launch early yesterday on the 10th, the Polaris Dawn crew has been busy as they prepare for the first commercial spacewalk. Currently, the actual spacewalk itself is scheduled for the third day of the mission, which is tomorrow, September 12th. Here, we'll see 2 astronauts stay inside the spacecraft, while 2 actually exit the vehicle and complete the EVA. After reaching its high Earth orbit, the crew has officially become the furthest human mission from Earth in over half a century. Here I'll go more in depth into exactly what the crew has been doing, views from outside the spacecraft, final EVA prep, and more. A Falcon 9 launched early yesterday morning around 5:23 a.m. Eastern Time. There had been a few delays to this mission related to weather, but they were able to find a clearing. In this case, not only were they looking for clear weather during the launch timeframe, but also about a week in advance when the capsule was set to return. This made the process a bit more complicated, but they were eventually able to find clear weather on both ends of the mission. The launch went well, and after about 12 minutes in, the Dragon was deployed to begin making its way to a high Earth orbit. One of the first official updates we got came in last night when SpaceX tweeted saying, "Achievement unlocked. Apogee 1400.7 kilometers. Forward bulkhead Draco firing during burn." This included a very unique video where you could actually see some of the burn taking place. Soon after, they confirmed that the apogee raising burn was complete and successful. Later that night, they tweeted again saying, "Polaris Dawn and Dragon at 1400 kilometers above Earth. The furthest humans have traveled since the Apollo program over 50 years ago." This included a view from an external camera showing the forward hatch of the Dragon spacecraft with Earth in the background. In order to get to this high orbit, they'd stressed before that it would require the maximum performance of both the Falcon 9 and the capsule. As far as why they went to such a high orbit, here they'll be orbiting through portions of the Van Allen radiation belt. Besides the EVA, Polaris Dawn is also conducting research with the aim of better understanding the effects of spaceflight and space radiation on human health. However, the spacecraft wasn't at this high Earth orbit for very long before SpaceX began to lower the altitude. By this morning, Dragon and the Polaris Dawn crew had completed 6 orbits of Earth at around 1400 kilometers. Then, over the course of about 5 hours, the vehicle performed 4 burns to lower itself to an orbit of around 190 by 742 kilometers in preparation for tomorrow's spacewalk. Fortunately, besides just frequent updates on the spacecraft itself, SpaceX also provided an in-depth update of what the crew did on day 1. Here they were quoted saying, "The Polaris Dawn crew completed their first day on orbit, also known as Flight Day 1. After a successful launch by SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket to low Earth orbit from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida at 5:23 a.m. ET, the crew took off their spacesuits and began their multi-day mission. Shortly after liftoff, the crew began a 2-day pre-breathe protocol in preparation for their anticipated spacewalk on Thursday, September 12th, Flight Day 3. During this time, Dragon's pressure slowly lowers while oxygen levels inside the cabin increase, helping purge nitrogen from the crew's bloodstreams. This will help lower the risk of decompression sickness during all spacewalk operations. About 2 hours into Flight Day 1, the crew enjoyed their first on-orbit meals before engaging in the mission's first science and research block and testing Starlink, which lasted about 3.5 hours, they said. It's important to point out that while the EVA is the main mission milestone, the crew was also conducting a number of other tests during the 6-day mission. Focusing back on Day 1 activities, they continued by saying, "Dragon made its first pass through the South Atlantic Anomaly, or SAA, a region where Earth's magnetic field is weaker, allowing more high-energy particles from space to penetrate closer to Earth. Mission control operators and the crew worked closely to monitor and respond to the vehicle's systems across all high-apogee phases of flight, particularly through the SAA region. By around midday, the crew had settled in for their first sleep period in space. They finished by saying, following a healthy systems checkout, the crew and mission control will monitor the spacecraft ahead of the vehicle raising itself to an elliptical orbit of 190 by 1400 kilometers at the start of Flight Day 2. By now, this has been completed, along with the lowering of the orbit as well. At this point, until late tomorrow, the main focus is getting ready for the spacewalk." The Dragon spacecraft doesn't have an airlock. This means that when they do open the hatch, even though only 2 astronauts will be exiting the vehicle, all 4 will need to be in their EVA spacesuits and ready. In total, the spacewalk is set to last about 2 hours. During the operation, Mission Commander Jared Isaacman and Mission Specialist Sarah Gillis will separately exit the Dragon spacecraft through its forward hatch. The other 2 astronauts will remain seated, managing spacesuit umbilicals and monitoring telemetry on Dragon's interior displays. Last month, Isaacman said in a quote, "The EVA probably makes up the majority of the development for Polaris Dawn. You're throwing away all the safety of your vehicle. Your suit becomes your spaceship." He also pointed out, after more than 2 years of training, we're excited to embark on this mission. "We are incredibly thankful for this opportunity and to the thousands of SpaceX engineers who have contributed to this endeavor. Throughout our mission, we will aim to inspire humankind to look up and imagine what we can achieve here on Earth and in the worlds beyond our own," he said. At the end of the day, there is risk involved in a mission like this. Even the SpaceX Vice President for Build and Flight Reliability said, EVA is a risky adventure, but we've done all the preparations. He went on to mention, I think it's really a tribute to this team that they can advance the state of the art, and we're going to do it as safely as we can. For a while now, SpaceX has been very busy testing its new spacesuit as the mission approaches. This will not only be the first commercial spacewalk, but also the first spacewalk using SpaceX-designed extravehicular activity or EVA spacesuits, upgraded from the current intravehicular or IVA suit. They explain that the EVA suit looks similar but provides greater mobility, a state-of-the-art helmet heads-up display or HUD and camera, new thermal management textiles, and materials borrowed from Falcon's inner stage and Dragon's trunk. SpaceX points out that all of these enhancements to the EVA suit are part of a scalable design, allowing teams to produce and scale to different body types as SpaceX seeks to create greater accessibility to space for all of humanity. In the months leading up to this launch, there was a lot of work to get the crew comfortable and knowledgeable with the suits. They said in a statement, the Polaris Dawn crew recently completed a series of spacesuit acceptance tests in preparation for the mission's extravehicular activity, or Spacewalk, marking the final significant developmental and test milestone for SpaceX's newly developed EVA spacesuit. These tests marked the first time the Polaris Dawn crew wore the spacesuit in a vacuum environment, which provided some necessary knowledge and familiarity. Some examples include an understanding of how the spacesuit performs in a vacuum, a collection of spacesuit and biometric data to assess the overall system's performance in a flight-like environment, and even insight into the various thermal states expected throughout the spacewalk, among others. After Day 3 and the completion of the EVA, the crew will move on to a few other mission milestones before returning. On the fourth day, they plan to complete a Starlink demonstration. Specifically, the Polaris Dawn crew has mentioned possibly transmitting a message down to Earth using SpaceX's constellation of internet satellites. They will be the first crew to test Starlink laser-based communications in space, which SpaceX believes will provide valuable data for future space communication systems necessary for missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond. On Day 5, the crew will be busy preparing for the journey back home and eventual landing. This leads to Day 6, where they're set to return to Earth. That will include deorbit burns, Earth re-entry, and eventually a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. As mentioned earlier, before launching they had to ensure weather looked good on the return date as well. Normally, when sending a crew to the ISS, for example, that's not nearly as relevant because they can simply just stay at the station longer until the conditions are safe. For Polaris Dawn, they have a limited amount of propellant and time in space, which means they basically have to return at a set time. This makes it extra important that the weather on that set day is clear to help aid the recovery and landing process. The Polaris Dawn crew is now only 1 day away from the first commercial EVA. Not long from now, they will open the hatch and 2 astronauts will exit the vehicle. Before then, the crew is continuing to prepare in addition to completing other science experiments. We will have to wait and see how it progresses and the impact it has on the space industry. Thank you very much for watching.